We got a black spruce distillation going on. So all of that is black spruce oil. And then below that, we've got the floral water or hydrosol. But right here, we got the bottom of our cooker. So these are our distillation units. So we turn steam on the bottom. That steam will rise up through the tips, saturating those wood chips and vaporizing any oil that's in there. And that steam and oil vapor will come up through the top and into these guys here, which are our condensers. So those have a shell of cold water around them, and all that steam and oil vapor goes through about 170 little 1-inch tubes in there, and that condenses back into a liquid. And then that liquid flows down our stainless steel pipes and into our separator. So that just separates through the natural properties of oil and water. The oil naturally wants to float to the top, and the heavier water naturally wants to sink to the bottom. That's the quick version. Let's go into the other room. It's quite a bit quieter in there. So this is our little mini test cooker. It's very much the same as what's out there, only a lot smaller. So what we'll use this for is the beginning of the season before we go out and harvest. We can go out and cut down 1 or 2 trees and do a little mini test cook before we go out and harvest like 5 tons of wood. But this is very much the same. So we got the distillation chamber right here, and it comes up, and then we got cold water in here, which is our condenser, and then we just collect it in a
beaker.
Yeah, somewhere around here. Usually it's sitting right here, but no, we got another one. It's yeah, I don't know where it is.
Is that this one, the smaller one? Here?
Oh, it's probably. Well, and potentially not waste a lot of wood. At the beginning of the season, we'll go out and we'll test, make sure Wes can test a sample. He tests it, make sure it's good, and then we'll go out and harvest. That way, instead of cutting down 5 tons of wood chips, we'll only cut down a couple of trees. But this also allows us to do a lot of testing as well throughout the summer. So the nice thing about Young Living and all our corporate farms is we're also considered research farms. So Young Living's given us the ability to go out and just try new stuff. So a couple years ago, we were only doing black spruce. We only distill black spruce in the wintertime, usually from January to May. And the rest of the year, we got 7 months that we're just sitting there going like this. Not literally, we got lots of stuff to do, but we're not making any oil for 7 months. So we thought, well, that's only gonna be sustainable for so long, so let's go out and try stuff. So we went out into the forest and just wandered around for a while. Oh, I don't have it, I brought it home last time. I have a book, it's called The Boreal Herbal. It lists all the plants and trees in the boreal forest, which we're in, and all their medicinal uses. So we kind of used that as a guide and said, okay, well, let's go out and let's look through here and see what primarily the Native Americans have been using for hundreds of years, what we can kind of use for that. So we know trees are the one we know the best. So trees were what we looked at first. So white spruce, fir, subalpine fir, and lodgepole pine are 3 of the other conifer trees that are the most popular up here. So what we did is we went out to the forest, cut down a couple of trees, brought them back, did a distillation, and got a sample of that oil, and took a big sniff and see what we got. Wes could test it in the lab. We realized we had something good, but we still needed to do more testing. So just because we did 1 test and it turned out pretty good, we still needed to test a lot more. So what we did is for a full year, every day of the week, we picked a different tree. So not in order, but say Monday we did white spruce, Tuesday we did pine, Wednesday we did fir, Thursday we would still do black spruce. Even though we knew what we were doing with black spruce, we still did more testing for the year. And then on Friday, do you want me to go slower?
No.
Okay. On Friday, we did kind of a fun day, or just go try something. If you messed up during the week on one of the other ones, you can redo it, or we can go out. So we had, during the summer, it was where we really got fun. But Young Living already does yarrow, already does goldenrod, but they grow wild up here. So we thought, okay, well, let's head up the highway and cut some plants down and go test them. if something happens ever down in Mona or Mount Nebo and they lose their crop, then we could potentially do something up here, and it grows wild up here, so we know it's a native species. We're not introducing something that could potentially harm the environment up here. We've got a couple of really bad invasive species up here. Like the oxeye daisy was one of them, which I was like, oh hey, that looks kind of cool, let's try that. And then I did some research on it and found out that it's an invasive species, and if you're caught with it in your flower garden at home, you can actually get a fine, and you're supposed to pluck them and kill them because they're not native up here and they just take over everything. So okay, well that one's gone, so we'll try some yarrow, we'll try some goldenrod. We tried fireweed, which is another one that grows really wild up here and prevalent. It's a flower that grows about that tall. It's got a beautiful pink stalk, like tall cluster of flowers on it. That again, the Native Americans have been using for a long time.
For what?
A lot of things. So they like make a tea out of it. They like put the new shoots in salads, and yeah, it's a pretty cool flower. They make jelly out of it. I could not get any away with it. So that's not saying there's nothing in there, because when we tried yarrow and when we tried goldenrod, we failed miserably. We could not get anywhere. Like, I'm talking less than a drop of oil on one distillation. Because we weren't doing it right. We were cooking it like we were distilling trees. Cut it, chip it, throw it in, cook it. We cook them fairly quickly when we cut trees. Even though trees are a lot more forgiving, we have a bigger season. We don't really have to test them quite as much with the BRIX, which I'll get into when I explain how I failed with yarrow. So what we did is summertime, yarrow's blooming in the highway. Wes, let's go pick some yarrow. So me and Wes jump in the truck, we drive up the highway, find a good patch of yarrow, and we're out there with a Rubbermaid tote, standing on the side of the highway with scissors and two weird guys cutting flowers on the side of the highway. We cut a big bundle of them and brought them back, tossed them in here, turned the steam on, and we let it go for 4 hours, and like I said, barely a drop. Like, not even enough that we could separate from the water. Okay, well, maybe it's the wrong time of year. So we waited a month, did it again, failed miserably. Well, maybe it was supposed to be earlier in the season, we missed it, so let's wait till next year. Next year we'll go out there earlier and try it. Again, failure. Then we're, okay, well maybe yarrow is just not good up here. Let's try some goldenrod. Failed miserably. What are we doing? So that time, I kind of bit my lip and sucked up my pride and called Dan in Mount Nebo, Mona. Said, hey bud, how you doing? Oh, good, Kevin, what's going on? Well, I don't want to step on your toes. I know you distill yarrow down there, but I saw some growing wild up and down the highway, so we thought we'd do some trials, right? Try it, see what we got. Oh, that's so cool, Kevin. I said, not really, Dan. I said, I cannot make anything. Like, what am I doing wrong? So the first thing he said was, what's your BRIX? I said, that's a good question. What is BRIX?
Because trees don't have BRIX.
They do, but it's not as important
right?
to the class. So he said, okay, well, let's take a step back, Kevin. And so he taught me about BRIX. So typically a BRIX tester is used in like making wine or something. What it does is it records the sugar content in your liquid. So for a plant, what we'll do is we'll harvest a little bundle, and in the corner there I've got my little homemade press. So I'll squeeze that plant material and I'll get a little bit of liquid out, take a little pipette, and drop some liquid on this little prism here, and then hold it up to the light, and inside there's a little graph, and it's normally blue. And then where the sugar line is, it'll be white underneath that. So there'll be a really distinct line of what your sugar percentage is. So I don't know the number off the top of my head, but Dan says, okay, well, let's use 10 just for a nice, easy round number. I don't think it was 10, it was a little higher. But he said, okay, so go test the BRIX. Once it gets up to 10, again, that's not the number, but once it gets to 10, then you can harvest it. I'm like, oh, okay. So I went out and tested, it was like 4. I'm like, oh, okay, so wrong time. So a couple days later, I went out and tested it, and when it got to that magic number that Dan said, we cut a bunch, and then he said, once you've cut it, don't distill it. What do you mean? Well, let it sit out in the sun or in the shade, let it get warm a little bit and kind of dry out just a little bit, and keep testing your BRIX. Okay, well, you're the boss, you know what you're doing, so put it on a table outside in the sun and let it sit for a couple hours, and then test the BRIX, and that number went from like 10 to 16. And what it does is when it bakes out in the sun, that sugar molecules are released from the plant, and now you're going to get your best quality oil. So I had no idea. Like I said, with trees, cut it, chip it, cook it. Really, you know, when those chips get dumped off, we usually cook them the same day, if not the next day. But we don't usually let them sit for a long period of time. So I did that. We let them sit, we tested the BRIX, it went up, distilled it, and we went from like less than a drop to like 4 milliliters, which was like absurdly better cook. And taking pictures and sending them to Dan. Oh, check it out, bud. And yarrow oil is like a brilliant blue oil, which is pretty cool. So you can really see it in there. And then we did the same thing with goldenrod. And I'm like, okay, so you taught me something. But again, it wasn't to take yarrow away from Mona, but just to try it. If something happens, we can do it. Again, it's a native species up here, so it's not like we would be introducing something. Like blackberries. Did you know blackberries bushes are like highly invasive? They weren't from over here.
Oh.
And they're everywhere. Like my dad lost like 100 feet of his backyard because of blackberry bushes, and he cannot get rid of them. He went in, cut them all down, burnt them all, and then there was like one berry, and it all grew back. So we don't want to do something like that. I mean, obviously, we're not going to plant blackberries out there, but if we were to plant something that was highly invasive, took over, that's not good. So we want to do native species and something that'll work with the environment up here. So, you know, those are just different things that we tried to say we could do them. It's kind of cool to have those oils in the cupboard there that we could pull out and say, oh yeah, we tried it. But for the other conifer trees, kind of went on a sidetracked a little bit there. Let's go back to conifer trees. The 3 other conifer trees, the pine, the fir, and the white spruce, so we did those tests for a full year, and then we sent all those samples down to the lab in Utah and let Chris Packer and Rex kind of look at them, test them, smell them, see what they liked about them, see what they didn't like about them, and we realized that there is a very big correlation between season and the tree. So black spruce, winter tree. We can do it in the summer. It does smell a little different. Constituent range is very close. With white spruce and pine, we found quite a bit of difference though in winter and summer. So those, pine is another winter one. White spruce is summer. Fir is also summer. So fir is more the quantity of oil, summer to winter. There's a lot more oil in it in the summertime than there is in the wintertime. But the quality or the makeup of the oil is pretty much the same. So it's better to do it in the summertime because we're putting in less effort for more oil of the same quality. For white spruce and pine, they're the opposite. So white spruce, do it in the summertime or late or early fall, not in the winter. Pine, early winter, winter, not in the summer. Because the constituent range is quite a bit different. And the fragrance is also a lot different. White spruce and pine, if they're cooked in the right season, beautiful. Absolutely love them. Personally, if they're cooked in the wrong season, I'm not a big fan. I don't judge anybody, but to me, the closest thing I can liken it to is cat pee. Like I said, to me it's a very off-putting fragrance. Beautiful in the right season. But in the off season, it's not the great. So that's why we wanted to test it all year round, find out the optimal time of the season to cook it, which just so happens to be opposite of black spruce, which is perfect because now we can do black spruce in early year, fir in the middle of summer, white spruce late summer, and then pine in the early winter. So it kind of spreads out our year all year,
Yeah.
And then in the slow times, we can still do some testing or go out and play in the forest and kind of carry on that Gary's legacy of youthful exploration. I've heard so many stories about him just running into forests and checking stuff out because he saw a beautiful flower. And, so we try to keep that excitement alive a little bit in our testing.
Have you smelled cedar wood? Because a lot of people say it smells like cat pee too.
I actually quite like the cedar wood.
Yeah, me too. But so it's different cat pee smell.
It could be, yeah. It could be a different speed. But I grew up right across the river from a cedar mill. So driving by there, I always smelled the smell of cedar, fresh cut cedar.
But the oil.
The oil is a little different, but it still has that memory soaked into the back of my head from my childhood growing up, that every time I smell Western red cedar, it kind of brings me back to the Albion Ferry and crossing across Maple Ridge and driving around that sawmill. So, but yeah, I mean, I've also heard rose too is one of those ones that some people it smells bad, some people absolutely love it.
Rose?
Yeah. It's all dependent on the person, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's the same with food and flavor and I mean, I can't stand onions. Other people absolutely love onions.
Yeah.
For me, it's the smell and I just, nope.
Just like durian.
Yeah, there you go. I'm happy to say I've never smelled it, never tasted it.
Oh,
I've heard stories.
You know Mike Carter?
Yeah.
He loves durian.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to bug him about that.
Yeah.
But I've seen videos of people eating, and I'm just not that adventurous.
Quite a few of us like durian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's all dependent on the person and you know what you grew up with, what you.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah. Okay. So that was testing. So now we go to filtering and decanting. So once we've made our oil, we've collected that oil off of our separator. You guys could see in that oil, there's a little bit of fibrous material or dirt or whatever you want to call it in there. It's cellulose fibers from the tree. So that's all organic material. We want to pull that off and extract that from the oil so we're just left with the oil. And the way we do that, a very high technology coffee filters. Specifically unbleached coffee filters. We want to go with the natural fibers. Bleached coffee filters we don't want to use because they've been bleached. No matter how much they wash them, there can always be a trace of bleach left behind. I don't want that in my oil. So unbleached coffee filters in its natural fibers. And we just run that oil through the coffee filter to pull out any of that organic material. We want to do that relatively quickly. I don't know exactly how long. We do it within a couple of days. But if it's left for a long period of time, that organic material can start breaking down and create bacteria. And we don't want that. So we want to clean that oil fairly quickly. And then what we've got here is our separatory funnel. So this is just the way it's shaped, allows us to pull off a couple of drops at a time. So when we pull the oil off, we're inevitably going to get a little bit of water with it. And again, even though water and oil don't mix, if they're left for a long period of time, it can cause what's called hydrolyzation. And they can kind of blend together. So we want to pull that oil off so that doesn't occur as well. So we're just left with 100% clean oil. And that is the extent of the processing that goes on with the oil. It's just filtered, and that's it. When we collect it, we collect it in what we call our milk jugs, just because that's what it reminds me of. Once it's filtered, we weigh it up, and then we record that information, take a sample, and send it upstairs to Wes. Then Wes can test it in the lab. Once he gives us the okay, then we can put it into one of our 55-gallon drums. Normally what we would do is wait and collect all of the oil off of a single truckload and then give Wes the sample of that. At one point, we were sending him a sample from every single distillation. And when we were doing 10 a day, I don't know if Wes told you how long it takes him to do it, but if he's working an 8-hour shift and we're doing 10 of these, I think it's just over an hour to do each test. So he was trying to squeeze 10 hours of work in an 8-hour day. So he was falling a little behind. So we decided to just do it by the truckload. Because realistically speaking, if one distillation is bad on that whole truckload, the whole truckload is bad. You can't really separate those wood chips into individual distillations when you put them all together like that. So we'll collect all the oil, send Wes a sample, Wes tests it, says yes, good, or it's out a little bit. If it's out a little bit, and it will be usually at the beginning of the season and the end of the season when it's coldest and warmest. It's a natural product, so that constituent range can vary a little bit here and there. The weather really affects it as well. So last week it was really warm. Like I was saying to you, you guys brought the cold with you. But yeah, it was in the positives all week. So the oil constituent range is going to adjust a little bit just because it's warmer. But what we'll do is we'll just blend those together. The beginning of the season, end of the season, we'll meet in the middle, and we're left with just all the glorious black spruce oil. So, yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
So you really filter all the oils with just 3 measuring cups?
We usually just do it in one.
Okay.
Everything is done by hand here.
Okay.
So every drop of oil, Northern Lights black spruce that you've seen, has been filtered by hand by pouring from one to the next. Wow. It's a little time consuming, but it's done pretty quick. Takes about 15 minutes to filter one distillation. And that, again, that depends on how much oil we collect. But yeah, usually about 15 minutes. It's not too bad.
So I guess the reason why Shelby was asking is because she was at the Highland Flats in January.
Okay.
And they started using the new filters because the Granford, they distill more and then they have more oils. So then with the new filter system, they get filtered. The oil get filtered. Yeah. The oil get filtered faster.
Yeah.
But with the Northern Lights black spruce, I guess it's less oil.
Yeah, we got a little less. The other thing we have, I don't know specifically Highland Flats, but I know at Mona, basically what they do is they conveniently stole one barrel for us. If you ever go down there and look at the barrels and see if they got etched in the side of Northern Lights Farm on them, and just poke Braden a couple of times for me. I bug him every time I go down there. Because I'm joking, he was given those barrels from the DC. But yeah, they're conveniently Northern Lights barrels. But what he does is he collects all his oil in a big 45-gallon drum and then has a little cap on the bottom that he just kind of cracks over and filters it just by flow. So he's not pouring everyone. For us, though, one of the main reasons why we want to do it all by hand and individually is so we can report back to the landowners. So we're on private land right now, harvesting, so we pay them. Oh, excuse me, sorry. We pay them for the oil we collect off their land. So when we're finished the distillation, we weigh it, record that on the paper, and then at the end of the month, we'll scan all those, send them to the landowner. So every individual cook or distillation, he's got a record of how much oil that produced. So at the end of the month, he can bill us, invoice us, and we want to keep as much transparency as possible. So we also record as much data as possible. So Gary will record, what the ground temperature was when he was harvesting, what the air temperature was, what the weather was like, where he was. So we can go back and say, okay, well, hey, say you get a bottle and it smells different. And you call customer service and say, hey, we got a bottle of black spruce, it smells odd. So they can look up the lot number, call us and say, hey, this was lot number da-da-da-da-da. Somebody said it smells different. Can you go back and research? So we'll have the delivery logs that we can cross-reference. Wes will have a sample still, because we collect on every distillation. We'll collect a bottle about that big and give it to Wes, and he'll carry that, stick it in his cupboard. I think he's got a sample from almost every single distillation we've done.
Yeah.
I say almost because when we first started, we were only doing a 5 ml bottle. And if he tests it a couple of times, he'll run out. So we realized, hey, wait a minute, let's do a little bigger. This is a 60 ml bottle or a 50 ml bottle. So he can test it a bunch of times if he needs to. So if 2 years down the road, somebody says, yeah, hey, can you go look up this lot number? He can go in, oh yeah, here's the research or the data I had from the original test. Here's the sample, let's run it again. Here's where it was distilled, this is the date it was distilled, this is how long it was distilled, all the information possible. So we have all that ability to go back and look and research that. What have I missed? Time frame. I guess I didn't say that out there. I kind of glossed over it a little quickly outside there. I apologize. It is quite loud out there, and for some people that steam whistle kind of really affects their ears. So
What do you mean by time frame?
So the time it's distilled. So black spruce, most of the conifers are about 4-hour distillation. But that is pretty important to the makeup of the oil. And again, when Wes, I don't know how in-depth Wes went, but he'll probably go a lot more in-depth on Friday when we test, when we run through the oil that you guys have collected. But when you're distilling, steam is pretty stupid. What it can do though is it can carry a certain mass of molecules with it. But because it's not smart, it wants to take the light molecules first. So that's why a lot of times in the first half of the distillation we'll get most of our oil, and the last half we'll get quite a bit less. So black spruce is about a 70%, 30% split. The first 2 hours is about 70% of the oil, last 2 hours is about 30% of the oil. But that last 30% is really important to the makeup of that oil because it carries a lot of the heavier components that make that oil. So by, again, researching for a year, so we did some tests, okay, well even when we installed the new boiler, we did another test that we distilled the oil. First hour, we took off a sample. Second hour, we took off a sample. Third hour, we took off a sample. And the last hour, we took off a sample. When we were doing the test distillations, we did some longer, some shorter, just so Wes could test all the constituents in that oil and make sure we have the complete package that makes up that oil. So I'll pick on lavender for a second, because lavender has Nicholas Landell. Has anybody met Nicholas Landell? I know you guys have.
He's been in Hong Kong.
Okay, yeah. Wonderful man. Basically was born in a lavender field. Not literally, but there's pictures of his mom and his dad and Gary. He's like this big in a backpack in the lavender fields. He literally grew up in the lavender field. So to me, he's the guy that knows the most about lavender in the world. He's got
We call him the Lavender Prince.
The Prince of Lavender, yeah.
Yeah, Prince
Actually, he fired me because I couldn't identify lavendin one day. Just as a joke. So for lavender distillation, it's about an hour and a half. He gets about 75% of the oil in the first 45 minutes, and then 25% in the last 45 minutes. So now, because I don't distill anywhere else, all I know is Young Living's policies and practices, and we want a complete oil. But in my head, for business-wise, most businesses, all they care about is making money. So, and again, I don't want to say this is how other companies do it, but in my mind, if I want to make money when I'm distilling lavender, I'll cook it for 45 minutes, I'll turn it off, I'll reload it, and cook again for 45 minutes. And then in an hour and a half, I'll have 150% of the oil. The Young Living only has 100% of the oil. But it's going to be missing a lot of those heavy components. What Nicholas likes to say is there's no such thing as an essential oil police, but maybe one day he'll get the job. But because they potentially don't distill the heavy compounds, there's nothing that says that that's not 100% pure lavender oil, even though it's missing a lot of those good components that make up that oil. So Young Living has done all that testing that says, okay, well, lavender, hour and a half. And again, I may be off by a little bit. Black spruce, 4 hours. helichrysum, an hour and 45 minutes. Again, I could be off on a little bit on those, but we want to get all those components that make up the complete picture of that oil. And Young Living is really committed to that because that if you cut it off early, you're losing a lot of components that potentially could spoil all the benefits of that.
Yeah, and also that's also part of the reason why people always say wintergreen is toxic, especially for newborn babies and pregnant women, because most people just most of the essential oil companies just distill like part of the wintergreen.
Distill it until it smells right, and then put it off.
And then they lost the last part of the most important.
So you could be missing some of those components that truly make up the healthy benefit of that oil, and just left with the crap, for lack of a better word. It's not.
Yeah, and also that's why Young Living's wintergreen is so safe, and we have a lot of pregnant women and newborn babies using Young Living's wintergreen.
The time frame is very important to our oils. And again, testing for a year, that's one of the things we're testing. How long do we cook it for? Distill. I don't know why I keep saying cook. But yeah, so if we distill it shorter or too long. Now, some anomalies we've seen. We've been on some land with some really dry black spruce, and it just didn't have a lot of oil in it. So it was worth it to cut it off at 2.5 hours because there was just nothing being made after that. And what we did for that is we pull off all of the oil and then send a sample to Wes in the lab, make sure we have all those components that we want, and it meets that range that we want. And then we can measure how much it made in the next hour. And if it makes nothing in the next hour after we pull it off, well then there's no components left in that oil. We also had the other way around where I've left a distillation on for like 7 hours just because it kept making more. I don't know why, but that was one of the biggest distillations we ever did on black spruce. Normally we get between 7 and 12 kilos. 7 is not as great, 10 is where we're looking for, up to 12 is phenomenal. On that one we did 24 kilos, so it's double what the best we're looking, and it was just, we pulled the oil off in 4 hours and it was just coming up still. So we're like, okay, well, we can't turn it off if it's still making a lot of oil, because that means there's still components that are in there that we want to capture to make up that complete oil. So there is some adjustability on the fly, but in general, for most of the stuff we distill, we got a pretty good timeline set.
Do you test the oil like during the distillation? Like
usually it's distilled or tested afterwards.
After.
That way we can get the entire thing. We do some testing. So like I said, when we installed the new boiler, we tested it periodically every hour, just so we could know what's going on with that new system. The new system is slightly different than the old system. So the old boiler we had was what we call a fire tube boiler. So what that means is there's a big shell of water, and then in that one it has 178 2-inch tubes, and that's where the fire goes. So all the hot exhaust, there's a big 2-foot round tube in the middle. It's called a Morrison tube. There's a big fire in there. That fire goes, and then all the exhaust gas comes back and forth 4 times, and then out the chimney, and that heats all that water that's in there. The problem with those, it's not a problem, but because there's so much water in there, the potential for a catastrophic failure is a lot higher than on this new system. So what a catastrophic failure would be is, because there's 100 PSI, 100 pounds per square inch inside that boiler, and there's about 5,000 gallons of water in there under pressure, if it were to lose that pressure all of a sudden, all that water is going to want to instantaneously flash off into steam. So 1 cubic centimeter of water is 1,700 cubic centimeters of steam. So steam is 1,700 times bigger than water. So it's going to want to basically explode. I did the math one day, and I believe it was 21 or 24,000 pounds of pressure when it was up to pressure, when it was up to temperature and making oil. So if it ever catastrophically failed, and there's a lot of safety features on it to make it not, but the potential's there. I've seen some videos of it happening. This side of the building would not be here anymore. And again, there's a lot of safety features, there's a lot of redundant safety features to prevent that. But the new system, it's what we call a water tube. So instead of a big volume of water, the water is in the tube and the fire goes around the tube. So there's a lot less water in the tubes. I believe that one has about 120 liters or gallons. So that's considerably less. So if that one were to have a catastrophic failure, most likely it would just dump a bunch of water or steam on the ground and not explode. The other nice thing about that is it's basically the way the tube is it's in a coil. So it's designed to expand and contract, where I don't know how much you guys know about the properties of metal, but the hotter metal is, the more it'll elongate or expand. The colder it gets, it shrinks. That's why if you ever have a trouble opening a jar of pickles, run it under hot water for a second, you'll usually, or you can just whack it on the table. But, so the hotter metal gets, the more it expands. So the way the fire tube is those tubes are locked in on either side. So as it heats, it expands and creates pressure or stress. When it cools, it shrinks and creates stress. So because we start up and shut down every day, it caused a little bit extra stress in that, which, I mean, it's designed to handle, but those boilers are designed to run 24/7, 365. If you go into any hospital, university basement, chances are they'll have that exact same boiler in the basement. Most hospitals, most universities, most schools run a boiler system like that for their heating system, because it's more economical to run those 24/7 than something like a furnace on a massive scale building. But this new system, again, designed to expand and contract, designed to start up and shut down every single day. Safety is quite a bit nicer on this unit. Not that I was worried before, but I've talked to Brett Packer. He is our executive director of Global Farms, in charge of all of the farms around the world. And we both come to the agreement that the boiler room was probably the most dangerous place in Young Living. Again, it has lots of safety. I don't say that to scare anybody. But putting these new systems in made it a lot safer and just kind of reduced that stress a little bit, especially when having guests. The last thing we want to do is hurt somebody that comes here. You know, us, we can manage it, we're used to it. But so there's a lot more safety features on that. A lot less volume of water in there that could potentially cause a problem. A lot smaller. The words of Will Ferrell, there's lots of rooms for activities in there now.
And it saves much more time, right?
A lot of time. So the startup time is wonderful. Wonderful startup times on that.
It was like 15 minutes, right?
Like 5 minutes.
5? Wow.
This one's a little slower, 10 minutes, just because some of the regulations in Canada make me not put one of the valves on that they have down there that was an automatic valve. So now I have to manually slowly open it, but
still, compared to...
Wonderful. The other one today would have taken me about 45 minutes to an hour to start up, which means, you know, if you guys are getting here at 9, that means I get here at 7, turn on the boiler right away, let it warm up at 8, then turn on the distillation for 8:30, so it's running and we got oil downstairs when you guys get here.
Right.
Now, with the new system, now I'm still coming at 7, but I just wander around like I got nothing to do. I mopped the floors this morning, I had a bunch of other stuff that I could get done, and then at 8 o'clock I turned on the boiler, and by 8:15 I already had steam on the distillation. So, you know, 5 minutes to start up, 5 minutes to open the valve, and 5 minutes to wonder what I'm going to do with myself with all this time I got. But it's wonderful. We'll be able to put some storage space in that room now, which we were lacking a little bit of before because that boiler was so large. Much nicer startup times. I don't know how many times. Well, I do. And I don't want to say it, but I've come in at 5 o'clock in the morning, started up the boiler, get everything ready. And we were supposed to have the truck of wood chips come in at 6:30. And then I get a call after the boilers are already started up, already. Hey, so the chipper just broke. You're not getting any wood chips today. Okay, so now I've got 100 PSI in the boiler, so now I got to reduce that pressure. I've wasted an hour of my time. I could have slept in an extra hour. I wasted an hour of fuel, of propane. I wasted an hour of energy. Wasted an hour of patience and stress. But now I got to shut that boiler down because we're not getting chips. So now we've just wasted an hour and a half, 2 hours of time, energy and power for nothing. Now, we don't even think about turning it on until we're ready to go upstairs. So that unit, I don't know if anybody just poked their head in the window of the boiler room, but that unit was installed at Highland Flats. So you notice how they had a big open space in Highland Flats in their boiler room? Yeah. That's where that came from.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, we were looking at upgrading all the rest of the farms in North America and South America, which we've done now. So all of the farms in North and South America have the new steam generators installed, which are awesome. They're also a lot more efficient too. And Michael's been recording about a 30% increase in efficiency now that they've got those installed. But what he did down there, what Brett and Michael did when they were installing them, is they removed their 300 horsepower boiler and replaced it with 250 horsepower steam generators. With the thought of, well, if we're only doing a couple of distillations, we'll use one, and they're set up to automatically start the second one if they use too much steam. They never once had to turn on the second one. The only reason why they turned it on is to keep them kind of even in hours. They didn't want one just to sit there not used, and it's surprising how quick stuff can deteriorate when you're not actually using it. So they just, okay, we'll use this one for a week, we'll use this one for a week. And they just kind of switch back and forth, but they never ended up having to use both of them at the same time. So when we were talking about installing one, Michael said, well, you know, to save some money right now, you guys could just have ours, our second one. We don't need it. And again, with trees are a lot more forgiving. And again, Michael Carter and Highland Flats does a lot of trees, so they have a bigger window of distillation. It wouldn't be quite as nice, I think, if they were doing plants, like say lavender or something like that, where they have a really small window to distill in. Like lavender, they got 3 weeks or a month, and that's it. Yeah. And they do a lot of lavender in that amount of time, way more than anybody else in the company, in half the amount of time. So if they're down, or if they order, you know, the flame scanner. What the flame scanner is it's an infrared sensor that sees a flame in the boiler. If it doesn't see a flame, turns the boiler off, shuts everything down. So when we installed that, we had to replace that flame scanner. It took us about 2 weeks to get. So if we had that happening and we had a specific window to distill in, and we had to wait 2 weeks for parts, that would basically ruin our season. So for trees, it's not as bad. If we're doing plants, we'd probably want to back up. That's one of the reasons why Mount Eber, Mona, has 2 of them in there. As a backup, they can use one. But we brought that up here, installed it, and now we're living the dream.
Another reason that the steam generator is good is because you don't have to worry about cleaning up regarding the water, the hardness of the water, right?
We still have to do that,
but less. But you don't have. Do you have to shut it off like how you do it with the cooker?
Yeah.
You have to shut it off too.
Yeah. It's actually worse for hard water in this new one than the old one because of the water's only going through a small tube. So if that scale builds up, it's a lot more likely to close off that tube.
In Highland Flats, they have like the...
We do use a water treatment, involved water treatment with the new system though. So it's less...
So then you don't have to clean it.
No, so the old one, our old boiler, what we had to do is every 6 months, shut it down, drain it, and open it up and do an inspection inside. We won't have to do that with this new one.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so that was, Originally, we had to open it up every 3 months, which really, really sucked.
Oh, wow.
Because that was in the middle of our season. And in order to shut it down, we had to let it cool for a week. Because you can't just shut it off and drain it, because that water is super hot. And again, what I was saying with the tubes, expansion and contraction for hot steel and cold steel, is it'll cause a lot more metal fatigue if you just shut it down and drain it. Because now you're not slowing it down. Slowly, you're just basically shocking that boiler. So what we'll do is we'll shut it down on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then drain it on Wednesday. Let it sit open on Wednesday to dry out, because they'll still be quite warm in there. And when we open it up, we'll leave the windows or the manholes and handles off, and that'll the residual heat will dry it out even more. And then on Thursday, we can do our inspection. And then on Friday, we'll close it up, and then the following Monday, then we can start it up again. But that's a week out of the middle of our season, which conveniently landed right in the middle of harvest. The first year was the first or second year we did harvest? I can't remember. I got it written down. But we have what's called Technical Safety BC in British Columbia. And they regulate boilers, electrical work, elevators, plumbing. They're the guys that government regulation, you have to have this thing installed, otherwise it's out of permit or out of compliance, and basically a big money grab. Not really, they truly make it safe. But the one instance where we got really frustrated is we had harvest, 6 weeks of harvest. I want to say 2017, but it might have been 2016. Anyway, we had 6 weeks of harvest. So it was starting middle of February, going till the end of March. So the second week in March was when we were supposed to have our inspection. So I called up the inspector and I said, "Hey bud, it's Kevin. So my water side inspection that I'm supposed to do on March 10th, can I put that off for 3 weeks? Delay it for 3 weeks? We got people in town. I can't very well shut the boiler down for a week to get this done." No. I said, "Okay, well, I'm gonna have to do it early then." "That's fine. You can do it early." I said, "Okay, we'll do it early." And then just as I was gonna hang up, he said, "Don't forget, I want an ultrasonic test done at this time." So an ultrasonic test is a little device that shoots high frequency sound waves into metal, and it bounces off the backside and tells you how thick it is. So what he wanted done is test the thickness of all the tubes inside the boiler. So I said, "Okay, yeah, we'll get that done." So I did the test, or called out an ultrasonic certified guy to come test the tubes actually it was 4 weeks before harvest, or 4 weeks before it was supposed to start, a week before harvest was supposed to start. So the ultrasonic test found some pits, some divots in the tube. One specifically that was too thin for our inspector's liking. The normal tube thickness was 105 thousandths of an inch, and he found one pit smaller than a grain of rice that was 77 thousandths thick. So granted, it lost 30% of its material, but it was, smaller than a grain of rice. The fire tube boiler, if that caused a leak, what it would do is, that's not a catastrophic leak on that one. It'll just spray water into the firebox, it'll run a little cooler. We did that out at a gas plant south of town. They had like fist-sized holes in the tubes, and they let them run. But we sent that report into the safety authority, and they said, "Nope, shut it down, you can't run." What do you mean we can't run? "Well, you could run if you get a mechanical engineer to certify it and give his rubber stamp." So then we started searching for a mechanical engineer. We got one. He said he'll rubber stamp it because he has no issue with safety on this thing. But what he wanted was a report on when it was built and when it was retubed last. The problem was that we didn't have any reports that said it was retubed prior to the original build. So they had to go back with the codes that the original installation was on, which was 1982. And they were a lot more safe back then than they were a couple of years after that. when they reduced. Is everybody still awake? I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. But, anyway, they dropped the safety factor because they realized they had it way too high. So they went from a 5 times safety factor down to a 3 times. But because we didn't have any documentation that says it was retubed when the 3 times safety factor was implemented, we had to go with the original 5 times. So it failed. We had to cut every single tube out of the boiler a week before harvest, and retube everything.
Wow. And how long?
We didn't get it done before harvest.
Oh.
So the first group, Carol Howden's group, was got to see some open boilers and a lot of stress. We did rent a boiler. It was a rig boiler, so we couldn't use any of the oil we made off of it because we couldn't tell what was inside it. So we hooked that up outside. We were still able to do some distillation, but we had some contractors out. They cut out the tubes, retubed everything, and it was very stressful. Especially right before harvest.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, you could have let us go for 3 weeks, then we wouldn't have had to worry about any of this. But nope, we had to retube it. So after that, we put fresh tubes in it, and me and the mechanical engineer got together and we said, okay, well let's write a report to the safety authority saying 3 months is not going to work for us anymore. We have fresh internals in it, so let's extend that to 6 months. So he gave us the approval. Okay, yeah, 6 months now. So after that, it was May and November. So May when we end the season, do the inspection, and November before we start the next season, we'll do the inspection. So we never really had to shut down in the middle of harvest anymore, and have my stress levels go up to about here. But now with the new system, we don't have to do that at all, which is awesome. Faster startup times, a lot safer, a lot more efficient, more space. I can't say enough good things about it, so I'm pretty stoked. We just installed one system down in Ecuador last summer as well, so that's good. Highland Flats was the start, and then St. Mary's, and then I believe it was the beginning of the year last year, Mona finally came online. So yeah, now all of North America and South America are on the new Clayton steam generators. So. And Clayton's been really nice to work with as well. They're awesome. So.
How much are those steam generator compared to the cooker?
Well,
I mean the boiler.
I mean,
is it
we didn't
much?
pay for it. Michael did.
But yeah, is it much?
They are a little bit more
much
expensive. They are a little more expensive. But they're a lot better for what we're using.
It's more effective.
Yeah, the efficiency, fuel, labor, all that stuff. Like I was saying, just that whole not even turning it on before we get chips in the building is going to save us a bunch. It's like 5 or 6 times where I got the call in the morning. And, yeah, hey, something's broke. You're not getting anything today. It's pretty disheartening to.
Yeah.
Okay, well, shut everything down. I could have slept in for another hour. Not that I'm not an early riser anyway, so I would have been awake anyway. But could have had a nicer breakfast, or relaxed a little bit instead of rushing to get everything done and get it going. But then again, Michael started recording all the fuel costs as well, and he recorded significant fuel economy on the new systems as well. Well, just by going from a 300 down to 150 horsepower unit, they were able to distill the exact same amount.
So then it's a good news. I mean, in the long run, it's actually saving money.
Oh yes, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we figure within 3 years it'll be paid off. The return on investment.
Yeah.
And then again, so what we did in Ecuador is we bought them 2 different sized units. So one really small one and one almost the same size as that one. So that if they're doing ylang-ylang, they can just use the small one. If they're doing some of the bigger stuff, they can use the bigger one. So again, it's a little more efficient for them again, because now they're not having to start up the big unit and run it for just doing their little mini distillation ylang ylang cup.
Yeah.
So,
Nice. Thank you.